in the front of their book. They do the test in the back, theoretically.
So they do the spellings on that page?
Yeah, they can practice their spellings on the page that they've written the spellings on, and then the test will be in the back. I'm not daft enough to give them the test on the same page. But the idea is the books are a bit bigger, so they've got space to do the look at the word, cover the word, write the word, check what they've done. So, and then I can see that they've practiced them and how they've done it as well. Moving on to maths, this board will be down at the bottom in the cloakroom for a while, so don't feel that you have to take it all in now because there's quite a lot of information on it really. Year 1, recognising odd and even numbers, but now to 20, and we talked a lot about the pattern in the final unit. So, it is always 2, 4, 6 and 8, it doesn't matter how big the number was. They were quite impressed when they realised that 96 is actually an even number as well, and the bigger the number is, the better they like it, so that was quite good last week. Counting in 5s, but also in 3s from 0, so beginning to talk about multiplication, but not in the way that they think, they just think they can count in 3s. Comparing two numbers, now more than and less than they kind of get, more than they seem to be having trouble with. They want to, greater than is the nice word you'd like to use, but they think of bigger rather than, so getting them to understand that 87 is actually bigger, a greater number than 13 is quite a difficult concept, and I was doing it last week with some of them and they just didn't understand. So if you could do that at home, that would be quite useful. But even with numbers to 20 to start with, that 9 is a greater number than whatever. Number sequences, again, a very similar kind of thing. So can they fill in the gaps in an even number list to 20? Can they fill in the gaps in counting 3s up to 15 if 12 and 9 are missing? Things like that gets them to think. But also counting backwards. Now this is difficult. So if you can count in 5s to 50, can you then go the other way back to 0? That kind of thing, playing with numbers. Beginning to use the plus and the minus and the equal signs more written notation maths. Still in horizontal lines, not in columns like we learned, but to begin, and then to be able to read the sentence back so that they can say that 9 plus 3 makes whatever, or equals, beginning to use the vocabulary more. And also starting to use triangles and squares and other shapes for a missing number, so that 9 plus something equals 12. What's missing in the middle, doesn't matter what the shape is, what's the number, so they're understanding more. Small number bonds, not massive numbers, but that they can use it quickly. We use the number bonds to 10 all the time. That's what I've been telling them. Once you've got those, you can add up massive numbers, because it's only using those that's how you do it, even when you're an adult, and it's just getting them to play with them, really. Adding 9. The easy way to add 9, you teach them using the 100 square, you add 10, you take 1 away. It's the teacher beginning with year 1 to teach them tricks like that. Year 2, the other day, we're adding on 21 and 19. There's no way we could do it. So it's just the same as adding on 9 and adding on 11 that you would do. Do you know how to do it? Yeah. Well, it's the same, just that you add on 2 10s and another 1, and you take away 2. Yeah. So it's the beginnings of that, really. Money, finding totals, giving change, always really hard. They don't seem to make the link between it just being numbers and subtracting. Solving problems, very simple ones, not 2-step problems with year 1, just that we'll read something. With sweets is often a good one. If you've got 9 sweets and the 3 of them, how many do you get each? Like that. If you've got a pizza and there's 3 of you and you cut it into 6 slices, how many do you get each? Oh, I know, always works. Capacity, you're beginning to use litres instead of what's more than half full, empty, full, which is what we've been doing so far. Using the word estimate again, talking about symmetry, 2Ds and 3D shapes, which they now will need to revise 3D shapes again, but they can talk about them now, the properties of, begin to use the word of face for a side of a shape, things like that. The time is something that some children can do very well, some find very hard, so we'll start with o'clock again, 1/2 then year 2 move on to 1/4 and 1/4. And solving word problems, they're beginning to think, if it's school starts at 9 o'clock and lunchtime is at 12 o'clock, how many hours between the two, that kind of thing. But also with year 1, very, very important, number bonds to 10, can they tell you that 6 and 4 makes 10 and 5 and 5 makes 10 and 7 and 3 makes 10, and can they use them? And can they add on in their head by putting the first number in their head and using their fingers if they need to, or you've seen them at home, those that do going, oh, it's that many. But can they subtract as well? Really, really important that we get the basics in place now. Year 2, the same but on a bit, basically. Counting in steps of 3 or 4, forwards and backwards to 30 at least. Once they've got it, they can do it. And we look at, using the 100 square, you can look at the patterns that those multiplications make.
100 squares are really useful.
They're fabulous.
Thing to have up, actually. Even if you have that,
Yeah.
you can get them in posters. They're really, really useful.
Yeah, they are, because there's so many patterns that you can, that when we were counting in 5s and they had 100 square and coloured it in, and the pattern of 5 is, oh yeah, it's a strip down the middle and it's a strip on the end, and it always ends in a 5 or a 0. The pattern of 3, you can get lots of diagonal patterns, and the odds and evens pattern is just one and then the other, and it really brings it, the more visual you can make it, the easier it is to remember.
And then they start looking for patterns
Yeah,
themselves
they do.
then, and spotting things.
Which then in year 2 they're encouraged to do, is to extend the pattern, and if they've started to colour in a pattern on 100 square, without working it out, they should be able to see the visual kind of, oh yeah, it's going to be there, and then they can work it out and go, oh yeah, it was. And then we're working on to the things we haven't done yet. Rounding up numbers to 100 to the nearest 10. Is it closer? Now, it's easy to use, if you use a line from 80 to 90 and put a line, say, at about 7, that's the easiest way to do it to start with, so they can visually see, oh yeah, it's nearly at the end, isn't it? It's not near the beginning, that kind of thing. Using shapes to count for an unknown number again, which again, like the year 1 work, encourages them to think and to use the number a bit sideways rather than straightforward addition and subtraction sums. Using number facts and place value to add and subtract. Explaining results, really important. It's the main reason, or the main way that maths has changed, I think, since we did it. You're not just told the system and told to get on with it, you have to explain how you got it. It doesn't matter how you get it, as long as you can explain. Last week, perfect example, Arwen had one way of adding up 2 numbers to 100, can't remember what it was, and some other child did it another way, and we wrote them on the whiteboard, and they kind of went, oh, but you're supposed to be, and it wasn't how I was teaching it that lesson, but I said, yeah, but you got the answer. It doesn't matter, you will, and as adults, we've all got our own ways of working it out. It doesn't matter how you work it out, as long as you get the right answer, it really doesn't matter. And it was interesting for them to see that people do it in different ways. So yeah, explaining their results, recording their method. Doesn't really matter at this stage how they record it. They move on to column addition and subtraction and things next year. Really doesn't matter. Bridging.
Oh, that's hard.
Right, bridging through a multiple of 10. So it's where the number bonds come in. It's why we bang on about them so much at the beginning. So if they're adding something like 27 plus 6, that they know to split the 6 into 3 and 3 and make the 10, then add the 3. That's the way to do it. That's the easiest way to do it. It's not how they all do it, but that's how we're encouraged to teach them, and it's probably how, as adults, you actually do it, just you don't realise that's what you do. Some of them just get it like that, and actually we're not doing too badly really. Finding totals and giving change. Fractions, I mentioned pizza, bars of chocolate, very good way of doing fractions. Halves and quarters as well, now not just breaking something into 2, cutting an apple into 4 quarters. Quite a lot of the activities are saying now, oh, can you colour 3 quarters of something rather than just 1. Time, half past, quarter to, digital now as well as analogue. And then once they've got those, the rest kind of comes. Once they can master that much, it's usually fairly straightforward. Some children find it really difficult, some children can just do it. It's why I've encouraged them, if they've got one, to wear a watch, and they do kind of, sometimes they end up in my pocket because they play with them more than they look at them. And I go home, there we go. Solving simple problems, again, involving litres, half litres, always nice to get the water out. and sorting and classifying information. We did an awful lot on block graphs and collecting data and tallies and things before the holidays. And so it'll be more of that. It's nice for them to go around collecting data. They love it, having clipboards and going downstairs and asking them what their favourite crisp flavour is and all the rest of it. But then, what can they fill in the table that do the tally chart and do the total and work out on the block graph which goes at the bottom and which goes up the side. So that's maths in a potted fashion. Like I say, it'll all be, they've internalised all of that. Knowledge and understanding of the world. I've said lots of times, science, history and geography as we knew it. Animals and food. We have done it plenty of times before, but we really concentrated at the beginning of this topic on what they know, what they'd like to know, how we're going to find out, getting them to ask questions a lot. And we've introduced a new strand all the way through the school. It started in my class really with the PowerPoint things, giving them more input in their own education and what they want to learn. Has to be managed quite carefully. It doesn't mean that they run the curriculum and we do what they like and we're outside in the sand for the next fortnight. But we did it for the first time formally in timetabled last week, and it's called the Pupil Voice. And you'll see a big piece of paper on the door up in class, on the door to the storeroom if you want to have a look. And they were the questions that they wanted to ask this week when we said what the topic was in science this week, and the activities that they wanted out as part of the topic. So it's a bit of a learning curve for us as well, but the questions they asked were so interesting last week that it's going to work, most definitely. So yeah, animals now, the amphibians, reptiles, they're older now, they're into it. I'm half a step ahead of them, reminding myself of what I used to know. Characteristics of the different animals, but also the variation between humans and animals, what makes us different from the other animals in the planet. They asked the most fantastic questions. Thank goodness the internet works in our room now, because Google's going to be my best friend, I think. But I mean, it is well worth reading the questions that they asked, because I was like, no idea. But it's a very good question. But like I say, the differences between animals and plants, the difference between us and other animals. I've booked a trip to Pili Palace on the 22nd of May. We will have a talk by the guy who works there. We've been before, but obviously we're going to be looking far more closely into what we see this time. It's not just going to be a quick trip round. It's the last day before the topic finishes, so even those who had very little knowledge should know lots by then and ask, hopefully, some very good questions. After half term, food, yum. Different types of food groups, what's healthy, not what's bad for them, but what are treats. That we need food and water to stay alive. Somebody actually said it last week, somebody said, no, you don't need whatever it was, you need water. Yeah, quite right.
Don't need chocolate.
That's what it was, I think. Yeah. When somebody brought in a delicious birthday cake, of course you do, it gets me through the week. That you need exercise to keep you healthy, that can they plan a healthy meal? They might not want to eat it, but do they know which foods are healthy and what's a balanced meal so they don't have pasta, rice and baked potatoes and nothing else on the plate. Food from around the world. I have done this previously a very long time ago. I haven't done this topic recently, but we had a really wonderful food feast at the end where each child brought in something from a different country around the world, and we sampled lots of different food. We'll be doing lots of cooking. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully I've grown some stuff. I started the tomatoes at home, so hopefully we'll get some stuff grown. Now, our only problem is that stuff we plant now very often isn't ready in time for when we leave in the summer, so we're looking to plant stuff that actually will be ready in the autumn instead. Just that everything that Julie suggested, I went, oh God, they won't eat that. Or they won't like that. Or they won't do that. So it's under negotiation. I'm looking for suggestions if anybody's got any.
Pumpkin.
Yeah, well, that was our suggestion. And last time, RE, go.
RE now. This term, we've already started the RE with Why Did Jesus Tell Stories? So looking at two very familiar stories, The Good Samaritan, The Prodigal Son, but looking at sort of the message behind them. So they do a lot of work with sequencing the story, acting it out. We had some great role play last week, I think. Of The Good Samaritan. All wanted to be the robbers and the thieves battering in. There you go. So we're talking about, then we'll take that a little bit further then this week about how do how do you be a good neighbour, and what would you do if you how would you help a friend, and looking at various characters. We've got some pictures to look at, and what could be done to help the people, and who is our neighbour basically. It's sort of, you try your best to help everybody. And the prodigal son as well, looking at the message behind that, the idea of forgiveness. So they'll do the story first of all and acting it out and looking at PowerPoint and hearing the story read to them, and then start to dissect it a little bit about what's the message behind the story. So they really enjoy the role play, so we'll carry on with that. And then after half term, we're looking at how the Jewish people express their beliefs and practice. So looking at their festivals, Shabbat, their Sabbath day, what they do, how they prepare for that, and how children prepare for that. Looking at Hanukkah and Passover, looking at the teachings of Moses and how the Jewish people look to the Torah as their special book. So they've heard about the Bible, but they won't really have heard about the Torah and what that means to the Jewish people. So it's just touching on each of the areas, really. Not going into sort of great depth, but just showing how Jewish people celebrate their beliefs.
Okay. Yep. Creative. I'm just going to turn this a little bit to get the name right. They've started already designing. They've got a design booklet, a 3D model of an insect. They've had all the books out. They've looked at them very carefully, worked out which one they'd quite like to attempt. They've had to draw their initial design. The idea is that they think a bit more about it rather than me giving them a lump of clay and saying, make me an insect. And then at the end, once we've got our creations that they're going to start this week, they have to evaluate their design and work out what they could have done better and why the third leg didn't stick on, because, and everybody else's work as well, so that they can say which ones. It's been brought in a lot into, we do it a lot in PE as well, especially in gymnastics, where they will watch each other and then say what they liked. So they've done the initial design. I'll let them loose with the clay later in the week. But they've done 3D models before, and hopefully, the sculpture was such a success when we did it that they've learned a few things about how to stick two bits together. So we shall see. Still life. I mean, that will take us the whole of this half term, because to do it properly as a proper project is not just one lesson. And then after half term, when we start talking about food, another DT type thing, creating a healthy fruit plate. Obviously, we're going to have to have done bit of work on that before, but believe it or not, that's creative. There's a woman called, this is why I needed it turned out, Alison Mercer. There's a lot of her work on the Welsh Government's education website. There's a lot of internet resources already available to me. She makes pictures out of fruit and vegetables, basically. They're very child friendly, they're quite fun, and we're going to have a go. It'll be a very easy one to try and replicate. It'll be a nice, different from paintings and all the rest of it thing to introduce them to, and hopefully it'll get them to try a fruit they haven't tried before, to look at. She does a lot of faces, basically, so it should be quite fun, really. And assembling a product using their own design. Now, it will be making a face, probably, plate of food. But then, again, same as this term, they need to design it first and think about it. Linked to the language skills, we're not just doing anything we like anymore. It's got to be planned and thought out, and there's got to be some kind of design. Gymnastics, Amanda wasn't here on Friday, I had to do it. But it was all good. They've started doing sequencing, so sequencing movements. Again, thinking more about what they're doing now. They had time, we went through the different types of movements you could do to travel around the room. They had time by themselves to think about the three that they were going to do. They had to think about which way they moved from one to the other, and then they had to perform it to the others, and the others had to say which ones they liked, but also why they liked it and what they thought was especially good about it. And I also got them to think about the different levels. So did they do a movement that was high up or in the middle or low down, or did they do all three? And it worked very well, and they're beginning to become, they're not frightened of talking, any of them, but they're beginning to come a bit more, they think a bit more about what they say, and making them say why they like it rather than just saying, oh, I like so-and-so, their mate next door, or the one there. It was, it's good for them and makes them think rather than just doing. And we did a lot about, after the warm-up, I got them their badge. If they've got a school badge jumper, that's where your heart is, kind of, so they could put their hand there and talking about the heart being a pump and why it's important to exercise and all the rest of it. Athletics after half term, obviously eventually in preparation for sports day, and the weather's going to be beautiful, I'm sure, so we can get outside and do lots of running and ball games and that kind of thing, using the paddock instead of being stuck on the yard. And outdoor kind of team activities as well. Welsh started with animal names, a bit of positional language they did outside last week, animal songs, and then after half term making a cafe and getting them to write menus and learn the names of the food and that kind of thing. There's lots of stuff that I've previously had to download that I can now just access instantly on the internet, so make my life much easier. But we haven't allowed the children very much access yet, because I want to have plenty of time to have a very good talk to them about what you're allowed to use on the internet. What I have done is set up the laptop so that the tabs when they click on the internet come up with the Newsround website and come up with Google, and I can't remember what the third one is, but when they go on the internet, those are the ones that are available to them, and there will be some very strict guidelines. You don't need to worry, I'm not going to be letting them have free reign with anything they like. And if there is a game set up on the laptop, they're not allowed to change the game. I put it there for a specific reason. It's the skill I want them to practice. They know that they're not allowed to take the disc out and just do anything they like. And I think that's it, but there are just a couple of things I'd like to say first, if that's all right with you. Year one, very aware there's target meetings now this month, because this